What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. As many of you know, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee released a little over a month ago, and as I've been playing through the game, it's been getting me in a pretty nostalgic mood. While these games are somewhat stripped down in features compared to the previous titles, I still enjoy seeing Kanto look visually better than it ever has. Every remake that Game Freak has released so far has been well received and in most cases helped fix a lot of problems in the series, which is something that a lot of companies don't have the ability to say. In my opinion though, there is one set of remakes that are far superior to any of the others. Today we're going to take a look at Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver. Before we get started, I want to stress something really important. While the information I'm going to talk about in this video is factual, saying that the game is the best remake is completely opinionated. I've thoroughly enjoyed every remake, but there are a lot of reasons why I consider these to be the best. So rather than dislike the video, leave your opinions as to why you enjoy your favorite remake the most in the comments below. It is without a doubt that Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver are some of the most coveted games the franchise has to offer. Places like GameStop are selling these games for nearly double what they originally sold for, and even the reproduction carts on eBay go for around $20 to $25. When I see people ranking these Pokemon games, these games are consistently near the top, if not the highest ranked Pokemon games in the series. But why is that? Sure, nostalgia factors can totally apply here. The original versions on the Game Boy Color are the second most sold Pokemon games of all time, so it makes sense that these are up there. But at the same time, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire sold almost 2 million copies more than Heartgold and Soulsilver did. Besides, nostalgia is based on the player's experience. There has to be some concrete evidence as to why it's better. There are so many ways to analyze a claim as big as this, but let's start with the aesthetic aspects of the game. Before we take a look at the insides of the game, let's check out the packaging it comes in. The first thing that catches your eye is the box art. Sure, the case is super bulky, but they both look so good. Unlike the other games where the background is usually a patterned or a solid background, these games have depictions of the Bell Tower and the Whirl Islands for each cover. If you were lucky to buy these games new, they came in a cardboard box, which was meant to hold some special things, but was also a little throwback to the old cardboard boxes that they used to come in. The other very obvious new thing is the PokeWalker that comes in the box. This was a Pokeball-shaped pedometer that essentially allowed you to walk around with your Pokemon outside of the game and obtain rewards like special items and new Pokemon if you walk for a specific distance. It was really innovative for its time, and the package only cost $5 more than the previous titles, which definitely made me happy as a kid. I would love to show gameplay of it, but the ones I had when I was younger are long dead, but I'm planning another video in the future where we'll talk more about it. But we're not here to talk about the outside, so let's take a look on the inside. The first and most obvious thing is the graphical upgrade. Since these games came out a decade after Gold and Silver, we're on much newer and stronger hardware, which means that not only can it look better, but it can feel better too. The routes and cities are extremely vibrant in comparison to the previous installments, mainly because they were limited in terms of the Game Boy's color palette. Places like the Bell Tower and Goldenrod City are filled with life, which is really what most people expect out of a remake. And while visuals are nice, audio is just as important to the experience. All the tracks from Gold, Silver, and Crystal were remastered with additional tracks thrown in for special events, new locations, and areas that had duplicated music. One of the better examples would be Ecruteak and Cianwood City, who had the exact same music in the originals, but now have their own separate tunes to represent themselves. If you still miss that classic experience, Game Freak made it so you can obtain an item that allows you to change a majority of the game's audio to the original 8-bit music once you collect all 16 badges. With the obvious changes out of the way though, let's jump into the game. When you start the game, you're able to choose between being a boy or a girl, which was something that was available in Crystal but wasn't available when Gold and Silver released. This is probably one of the larger requests, and it would have been weird to not include it considering every game after the originals continued this option. They were also given a complete rework and name changes. This addition was something that didn't seem necessary at first, but because the other gender you don't choose is now a fully imagined character, it gave them a lot more life to the storyline. Once you get past the introduction sequences, all the small additions keep stacking up. The most glaring change is the fact that your start menu is now at the bottom of your screen, as well as a lot of other things that we'll get into. Because the Nintendo DS's main attraction is the additional touchscreen, Game Freak made a lot of the game manageable by only using the bottom half of the console. You can move your Pokemon, choose attacks in battle, and change all your options without pressing a single button. Helpful? Not in most situations, but it makes use of the primary feature of the console, which was a really nice addition. You can also now visually see how many badges you have, which was oddly only partly true in the previous games, as you could only see your badges that you earned in Johto. This avoids the confusion of seeing you only have 13 badges but have absolutely no clue which ones you still need. Now let's take a look at the other new things that were added into the games. One of the most interesting features that you get right at the start of the game is that Pokemon now follow you in the overworld the same way that they did in Pokemon Yellow. Not only does it give the game its own kind of charm, but it shows how much thought was put into the game considering that they needed to make additional sprites for all 493 Pokemon, special forms like Rotom, Unknown, Burmy, and Deoxys, and include shiny variants for all of those as well. To this day, this is one of the highest requested pieces of content to be put in any of the new Pokemon games. It's in the Let's Go series, so there's a strong chance that it's here to stay. Another cool feature is the run button on your touchscreen. When you press it, it automatically runs for you, so you don't have to hold the B button for hours on end. Although it's something that you get used to doing if you played the game for a long time, having the option to rest your hand is such a great feature, and it blows my mind this option has only been available in these two games so far. While we're looking at the bottom screen, we have access to another feature, registered items. Until the game's release, you were limited to having only one key item available for use, and if you wanted to register another, you had to override the other thing you had registered. In these games, however, they not only made it possible for you to have two key items registered at once, but they added buttons on the bottom screen where you can press to activate it faster. We're definitely a lot more spoiled now with the amount that we can register, but for its time it was actually quite a big stepping stone in progressing towards a more fluid experience for the player. Continuing here, we can take a look at a Generation 2 staple, the Pokegear. This received quite a decent upgrade from the previous titles by making it possible to obtain every phone number in the game instead of only 10, and allowing you to customize the theme of your Pokegear. It also added new features to make it a lot more useful. One of the best new features is the new radio stations that are offered. The Pokemon Music channel allows you to obtain Pokemon from Hoenn and Sinnoh on specific days when you tune into the channel. It can also increase the amount of encounters you have, decrease the amount of encounters you have, and play the classic Game Boy music that we talked about earlier. Other little sections added were that the unknown radio station now increases the chance of you encountering an unknown form that you haven't seen before, and that the daycare man now calls you when an egg is available to pick up, which can be helpful in quite a lot of situations. Pokemon Summaries also received a new update where you can now see how their nature affects their stats by having colors that show which stat is increased and which one's decreased. Another big addition to these games are legendaries. With the new in-game events, as well as some Nintendo events offered over time, it's possible to attain Kyogre, Groudon, Rayquaza, Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, Latios, Latias, and Celebi, which is a huge chunk of legendaries post-Generation 2. The special events were really something else too. If you have an Arceus, you can unlock a completely new area of the game, get another legendary of your choice, and get to watch a slideshow of the world for 2 minutes. If you got the Shiny Pichu event during Platinum's release and traded it to the new games, you could get a special Pichu with a notched ear that was only available in these games. And the same location, if you obtain the event Celebi during its release, you literally go back in time to learn about the backstory that reveals that Giovanni is Silver's father. Name another event that had a twist as crazy as that one does. The last new thing that we're going to look at right now are the berry pots. This is a new key item introduced that allows you to grow berries on the go. Because you can't normally grow berries like you could in Ruby and Sapphire, this makes it so you can easily obtain special berries for competitive play or healing while you're playing through the game. While there are a lot of new additions to these games, there are a bunch of aspects of the game that were revamped from the previous installments. A large majority of these were changes to the overworld, but there were also quite a few additional changes to the story and specific menus. When it comes to locations, a ton of places were redone to not only improve the looks of the game, but also add a little more realism to the world. In Olivine City, the lighthouse was given an elevator to reach the top, which fixes the confusion as to why you originally had to fall through the floor to descend the lighthouse faster in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. But at the same time, they added an outside platform you have to reach to progress, but the way that you get there is jumping out of an open window, so maybe there was another weird reason I couldn't figure out. Another area that was completely redone was the game corner in Goldenrod City. Unlike other revamps, this next one actually had legal reasoning behind the changes. Since Generation 1's release, the franchise has been under scrutiny for promoting gambling in not only the games, but through the trading cards as well. Because the game corner allowed you to purchase coins and wager them in slot machines, it was seen by a casino by an overwhelming majority of players. The European game rating organization PEGI deemed that gambling in video games was too impactful for children and essentially banned gambling in games that weren't rated 18+. While this wasn't passed by other rating groups like the ESRB, Nintendo decided to ditch the concept and replace the location with a game other than the original slot machines, Voltorb Flip. This game mode is a smaller scale Minesweeper style game. If you get all the multipliers for the coins, you go to the next level, but if you flip over a Voltorb card, you lose all the coins that you earned. This game is just barely sliding onto the law that Peggy set in place, as you don't gain currency by playing, as the coins can only be redeemed by the men in the game corner. To be honest, I actually think that these games are a lot more entertaining anyways, as there's a strategy to winning rather than just getting lucky with the slot machines. In addition, all characters in the game named Gamer were changed to Private Investigator to avoid any future conflicts. Controversy aside, there were quite a few more locations that were changed. Mount Silver was completely redone and increased the total areas from 5 to 9. By adding things like a mountainside and 3 additional floors, it made the area feel more like you're actually climbing a mountain, as it's moderately confusing to traverse on your first playthrough. At the top of the mountain you can still fight Red, but he's even harder in these games than Gold and Silver. The Safari Zone location of Fuchsia City was replaced with the Pal Park from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. This is the best place to put it, as the area didn't really have any good purpose in the originals. But for those fans that miss the Safari Zone, they added it back into the game, but created a completely new area of the map to not overcrowd the current areas. This resulted in having 5 new locations available to catch new Pokemon. The Safari Zone in these games are also the most engaging out of the entire series, as you can decorate the different biomes, and depending on what you put in them, changes what Pokemon spawn. This can make it possible to obtain Pokemon from Hoenn and Sinnoh, which helps almost eliminate the need to have any of the other games to complete the decks. The last 3 big locations in the game that were remade all have the same theme. They weren't in the originals. Instead of a weird tree maze, the Viridian Forest is back, but the area was slightly changed to give it a little more character. The Cerulean Cave was also added into the game, which made it possible to obtain Mewtwo, which was a huge complaint in the original games, as the only way to obtain it was by trading from Generation 1. In addition, this section was given a new flair to it. Instead of going through a boring rock maze, they're now replaced with crystals, which is probably a reference to the name of the game. Lastly, the Seafoam Islands were added back into the game. Originally, it was only a small room that Blaine stood in because Cinnabar Island burned down. In the remakes, you can go through the original islands, but inside is a full gym where you can battle Blaine. A majority of these changes in the originals were because of the lack of space in the cartridges. Putting 2 regions into a single game isn't as easy as it sounds, and there were some things that had to be cut in order for both regions to be available. Because the Seafoam Islands is now a location, it means that Articuno is possible to catch, along with the other birds in the trio. Zapdos was moved outside of the power plant because the post-game storyline takes place in that area, and Moltres was moved to Mount Silver instead of Victory Road in Red and Blue. With these added into the game, Mew was the only Pokemon out of the first 2 generations that wasn't available in the game. They did, however, release a Nintendo event for 15 days in October of 2010 to help players fill the Pokédex if they didn't already have one. Speaking of the Pokédex, it was also given a new look. You now have a regional dex and national dex once you receive it, which was a concept that didn't reach the games until Ruby and Sapphire. The regional Pokédex has some of the Generation 4 Pokemon added in, as well as Pokemon like Magmar and Electabuzz evolve into Pokemon that weren't in the original games. Because these games are a merge of all 3 Generation 2 games, the Suicune storyline from Crystal was brought back, but instead of stopping before you challenge the Elite Four, they extended it to the post-game. This may seem annoying, but in my opinion it gave more life to Kanto because it gave incentive to explore all around the region until you find it. An interesting thing to note is that if you fail catching Suicune at Bill's Cottage, you can fight it again in Ecruteak City like you could in Pokemon Crystal. While Suicune is more of an event-based Pokemon, the other 2 legendary beasts are roaming Pokemon like they were in the originals. If you see my Johto catch 'em all, you know that catching these Pokemon are extremely annoying because you have to have them registered in your dex before you can start to realistically hunt them through the region. But in these games, you can hunt them as soon as you meet them in the game through your map card in your Pokegear. This was honestly one of the best changes they added because of how big of a problem it was in Generation 2. Finally, let's talk about some things that they fixed. All the berry trees that were on the map are now apricorn trees. This is mainly because they replaced all the original items from the game, but it also made the apricorns a lot less scarce. The trees are now color-coded so you know which apricorn you get before you even shake the tree. Even the Pokeballs that were made for them were fixed. Pokeballs like the Fastball were coded incorrectly in the previous games, to the point where they were almost useless, but now they fully work as intended, which helps catch the roaming beasts a lot easier than before. The last really impactful thing was the changes that they made to the bug catching contests. There were a lot of things that were wrong originally that I talked about in my Gold, Silver, and Crystal Catch 'em All video, but the main issue was that you had a really low chance to get into first place because of some coding errors. But now if you catch a low percentage Pokemon like Pinsir or Scyther, your chances of losing are pretty low. To put it short, this game added all the things that people didn't know they wanted until they got it. Heartgold and Soulsilver are what any remake should be. a modernization of a fan-favorite game that not only gives you the classic experience, but improves all the flaws that the previous installment had. Basically, every aspect of this game is perfect, and I think that's why an overwhelming majority of Pokemon fans love this game so much. The way they added Pokemon from future generations of the series made it feel like they were always in the game. The additional areas don't compromise the map or even force you to go there if you don't want to. These games also ushered in many new ideas like auto-running that hasn't seemed to touch the series ever since, which really does give the game its own charm. I think the best part about this video is the fact that I didn't even list all the changes and improvements that these games had to offer. And sure, a lot of things like Lugia and Ho-Oh having special battle music are on the smaller scale of impacting your playtime, but these little things add up over time and really change the way that you experience the game as a whole. To be honest, I originally didn't enjoy these games, but over the years I've realized why people love it so much, and it's now my go-to Pokemon game to play when I'm looking to have fun. If you haven't got around to playing it yet, I highly suggest checking it out, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about how it compares to the previous editions. And that's going to do it for today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like as I'll be uploading more videos soon. Post in the comments what your favorite remake is and why, and I'll pin the best comment at the top of the video. If you have any suggestions for videos you'd like to see, leave a comment below. Other than that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.